Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Ryan Tansom, the co-founder of Arkona. Arkona focuses on helping people view and run their company like a financial asset through educational training, fractional CFO services, and strategic planning. Ryan, thank you so much for joining the episode. I know you're on the other side of the podcast typically, so it's nice to dive into, your expertise, your knowledge, running a podcast, running a company, working within the service-based business, and, really kind of, looking at a company from a services and product standpoint that I think a lot of, companies that I have on the podcast kind of have more of a B2B, B2C product, that people are using. But I think there's a lot of, nuances to, having a service play along with your business. But before we get into all that, what were you doing before you started Arkona?
Oh boy. So I'm happy to, I'll do a flyby of kind of the inception story. Started with my dad starting our family business, Julian, that, he started in the early 90s, mortgaged our house, bought a semi truck full of copiers, didn't look back. Went from one employee to scaled it up to 115 employees, 20 million in revenue, 3 locations. I joined the business in 2009. We lost it was like 950 grand that year, and it was a complete turnaround. So I spent 6 years. I replaced about 60% of the employees, sold a couple of branches for cash, built out the managed IT services and the document management services, and then rebranded so we could be the B2B technology provider that we needed to be. I ended up running the business in my mid-20s. My dad and I couldn't figure out how to align our goals. He wanted out, and we didn't know what that meant. Hence a lot of the things I want to do now. Sold the business in 2014. They only took, at that point, 34 of my 90 employees, pretty much gutted the company. Not the buyer's fault whatsoever, but it kind of had a lot of, quote unquote, regrets. And I went, what the heck was that? And so that was in 2014. That is what started my podcast, because it was the way of kind of like learning what the heck had happened. And so all of that led to Arkona, Julian, which is, I built the business I wish we would have had 10 plus years ago, of someone that could help me understand how to view and run the company as a financial asset, how to grow the equity value, how to create more choices at an eventual exit when and how someone ever wants to do that, and truly enjoying the journey along the way, making the wealth that makes it worth it, and making the impact. So it's kind of like a whole 360 degrees of I'm just kind of, looking out for people that, resemble me 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's so fascinating when you go kind of through that founder journey and kind of go through the experience of this acquisition. And I have had a lot of founders go through acqui-hires, where, they get acquired and then now they're working for a company. It's a weird experience. But going through that transition, getting that company acquired and moving on from there, what was the process of the acquisition? What does it take, in terms of the different phases or different conversations you're having, and how do you land on one kind of outcome versus the options that you have?
Do you want the how I did it or how it's supposed to be done? Just kidding.
I guess.
I didn't know it. I mean, this is what we teach, right? I mean, we have a program called Intentional Growth. It's based on 5 principles, because this stuff is really complicated, but I don't think it needs to be. And it's about trying to align that goal that we have. And I'll just kind of philosophically tell you, I believe at the bottom of my heart and in practical reality that if you focus on growing a business, the equity value of a business by creating sustainable, predictable, transferable cash flow and growing the equity value, I don't care what anybody's revenue is. What's the equity value of your company and how are you growing that by creating good cash flow? You're going to have as many choices as you want. And then you're going to be able to run the process to sell your business and kind of separate a couple of things here. When people call me and they say, Ryan, I want out. I'm like, out of what? Your job that you get a W-2 paycheck for that you're doing all this stuff with, or your asset that you get distributions from? People usually want out of their job because they're burnt out. So you have to separate your job and then this asset. You can sell and monetize your asset a gazillion different ways. You can transition your role, keep owning the company. You could sell the company, monetize the asset, and keep your job. A lot of different ways to get that a Rubik's Cube done. Okay, so now that I got the kind of philosophical, here's actually how to do it now after 10 years, how I did it was, we're burnt out. We're sick of fighting. We're sick of trying to figure out what to do next. We don't know whether we should reinvest, take the money out. We talked to a bunch of people in suits, bankers, attorneys, investment bankers, CPAs, and none of that stuff that they were telling us made sense to us. It was like, oh, that's a great tax plan or great this. What should we do? Sell more shit. Revenue gross private checking account. Revenue gross private checking account. And that was how we were running a $20 million business. And so we felt so trapped, Julian, that like the conversation, we're so sick of the conversations. It was like, okay, we don't know how to get both of our goals aligned. And so we ended up selling the business to a local competitor, didn't know like all of the stuff we now talk about. And so we only focus on maximizing purchase price. The company in our marketplace, same products, same services, same kind of comp plans, same systems, same everything, same manufacturers. So it was truly like, do you want our customer base and a handful of the employees? And that's how we did it. Did not use an investment banker, did not do tax planning, did not like, again, I have 320 episodes of what I could have done differently, but hopefully I answered that in okay, which is like, there's the way that you should do it. And then there's what we ended up going in, what road we took.
Yeah. I guess when you think back, what would have been your ideal outcome, just for curiosity's sake?
I would have focused on growing the equity value of our company by creating a more sustainable, predictable, transferable cash flow, essentially more normalized EBITDA, paying off debt, as well as increasing the multiple by de-risking the cash flow, which grows the equity value of the company, and quit focusing on vanity metrics like revenue and employee count or customer subscriptions or all this shit that people only focus on. I mean, you go look up on Snapchat, Peloton, I could go down the list. What's their trailing 12 months of EBITDA? Negative $2 billion. Like, okay, that's not good cash flow. Like I want actual cash flow. So I would have focused on building a good company based on the right metrics, not the vanity metrics.
Yeah. Do you find that a lot of companies get lost in the vanity metrics and aren't actually honed in? What do you think percentage wise, if you were to, throw a number out there, our companies kind of misaligned with what
95%.
95%.
Well, I mean, like I gave all these keynotes, Julian, that like, what's your goal? It's a 20 million in revenue. I'm like, I had a $20 million business that lost 900 grand and was worth nothing. So who cares? And most people don't hear those stories. The whole title of your podcast is Behind the Lines, right? Like what actually matters? Like what's your definition of success? You know what I mean? And like, for me, it's not revenue. Revenue does not pay my mortgage or fill my Charles Schwab account. It's the equity growth of my asset that does. And so like, we're just not taught this stuff, man. And like, it's not ingrained in our communities. It's not ingrained in the peer groups or like EO Vistage, whatever it is. And like, don't you want to be rewarded for all the hard work? And that's usually additional cash flow, having a lot of fun and growing an asset.
No, there's so much that goes into whether it's a service or a product that people don't consider. We just went through an evaluation of our own, revenue and profit and kind of recalibrating on some metrics as well. And it's, you really get to the root at how much time you invest into what parts of the business, how those components actually influence the overall value of the company. And then you can really kind of hone in on the focus of whether it's client acquisition or, if it's a two-sided marketplace, like what we run, what are we investing more into? And
if I were to come to your company and say, Julian, I want to buy your company. If you could hand a baton off and give me the keys and you built a machine that you can show me how do you acquire clients at what kind of costs and how does that relate to the right services at the right service structure at the right margins that all flow into an additional cash flow, I can then look at that cash flow and provide as an investor or potential acquirer, say that cash flow, let's say it's $1 million. What is the possibility of that cash flow being there tomorrow, the end of this year, next year, and 5 years from now? All the multiple is how many years of cash flow is someone willing to give you your company, and is directly correlated with the risk that cash flow will be there tomorrow.
No, it's fascinating once you get into the weeds of building machine and what it takes. And I guess, one thing I always think about in terms of like planning and strategizing, whether it's month over month or year over year, how do you think companies can get more clear on their goals and their alignment into what they're focusing on? Is it, adding resources like yourself to really identify, the structure of what they're focusing on? Is it, is it a startup school? Is it something more simple? Is it something more complex? Just curious on how you kind of tackle strategic planning, because I think it's a really broad term and a lot of us, say, okay, we'll watch a couple of YouTube videos, get on a couple of blogs, go on Medium, read and try to duplicate somebody's process. But how do you say you have 5 pillars, 5 steps. But how do you structure kind of that strategy and that process?
I'd say like before we even talk about our 5 principles, I'd say, Julian, what is the target equity valuation you want at a point in time? Like, what do you want the equity of your company? And by equity, I mean, like if your house is worth $500,000 and you owe 400 grand, you have 100 grand in equity, right? Your company works the exact same way. So Julian, what in 2030, what do you want your equity in your company to be worth? I'm just gonna make it up. Let's say you say $5 million.
Yeah.
I can now back into that plan and say, okay, we now know how cause like $5 million in, let's say, I'm just gonna do some quick basic math. So $5 million equity value company, let's say the multiple's 5. That means there's $1 million in cash flow times by 5 makes you the 5 million. Let's say you have no debt. So you need $1 million in cash flow in 2030. I can now back into your income statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement of what that needs to look like to get there.
Yeah.
Truly, I mean, it's just math. And you'd say, okay, well, now what products and services are we going to sell? And what's our cost structure to get there? So I need to know, how are we going to fund the plan to create that $1 million in cash flow? And then how does that impact your ability to take a salary and distributions along the way?
Mm-hmm.
And like, we have to start there, dude. Like that's it. So like when you talk about strategic planning or this or that, all these flashy objects, like people have their head in the sand like an ostrich. Going, I'm just going to do this shit and just like wake up and hopefully someone's going to give me a check. It's like, no, let's pre-engineer that asset.
Yeah.
Which is what the whole industry of private equity does. By the way, venture capital makes bets on ideas. Private equity is in the business of buying cash flow and growing cash flow for their investors, which I like to partake in. So my point is, we have to start at the North Star, your target equity valuation at a point in time. What do you want your income to be along the way? Because if I said to you, hey, you can have $5 million in 2030, but you couldn't take a paycheck until then, you might go, sorry, Ryan, not interesting enough or can't do it. So there's 2 constraints there. And then we say, well, you have to grow at 40% year over year to get there.
Yeah.
Well, what if you can't afford to fund that? But maybe you should do an acquisition, or maybe you need to look at new products and services. So we start to think about the context and how we get there. So then we talk about the strategic planning, and that's right products, right, right markets, right fit and all this stuff. And you can do like, there's 1,000 different ways to do strategic planning, but there's an actual strategy or there's actual exercises to figure out product, your strengths, your weaknesses, like what markets you to get into, all that kind of stuff. But if you don't know where you're going and whether you can afford to fund that strategic plan or whether it's going to be worth it for you as the owner or not, how in God's name can you make those decisions?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, along the way, you kind of, I like to think about, okay, we have this perfect case scenario. We're back into this plan. We evaluate what products or services can get us there. What are the ways that you've seen, whether it's founders or CFOs, whomever your clients are, if they're not hitting those goals and measurements, what are some ways that they kind of, whether it's pivot or strategize against, missing outcomes? Because I think a lot of people, that's where the difficulty is, right? I set this goal out, I'm really excited about it, but then I miss. Now, what do I do if I miss?
Well, instead of, because I got 1,000 different examples I can explain about my clients, but I'll just tell you my personal story from this year. Okay. So like I created an in-person training program in 2019. What was the year after that? Well, that didn't work out. So hey, guess what? 8 months after the inception of the company, we now do in-person events, digitize it, scaled that very fast. So we've now had 400 plus people go through the training program.
Yeah.
They disproportionately kept saying, we need financial help. That led us to creating CFO services. So over the course of the last 12 months, so like the way our CFO services work is, and this is not intended to be a commercial, this is truly intended to help people understand like how we made these decisions. So our CFOs, they're like, we pay them between 150 and 200 grand base pay. They're on our payroll. And but I call them like close to $250,000 with bonuses. They're expensive. I need to have them have clients. Otherwise I'm paying their mortgage essentially.
Yeah.
So what happened was it became very difficult in the middle market for people to understand what a CFO does. What are their skill sets? What are they going to do for 25 hours a month? And I was essentially trying to force too many people into this white glove treatment, forcing them to go through this training, forcing them to then go into this white glove CFO services when they weren't necessarily sure. Because of this, sales we weren't hitting our sales targets. We had really good and happy clients once they got there, but the whole education and the timeline to our plan was getting pushed off. Like truly my ability to hit my salary is what I needed to be, but the distributions from the ownership, I was watching that get pushed further away. And I was watching my equity target get pushed further away.
Yeah.
We had some disagreements operationally with a partner of ours that then, because the plan got further away, forced us to have some good conversations. I then bought my partner out because of that.
Yeah.
So like truly it forced us to have that discussion, which we wouldn't have known to do that otherwise. We launched a new product offering, a service offering that was tech-enabled services with a financial planning dashboard that's like a CFO services light. That's only a couple grand instead of the $5,000 plus. And now we're able to scale at higher margins and, have more clients that are happier that can then graduate to the CFO services. And now I actually watched my 2030 goal come closer.
Sure. Yeah.
But like, I never would have been able to do that.
Yeah.
By the way, those conversations suck, Julian. Like, my editor, Pat, he's a great guy. I love him dearly. He helped me get to where we are, but like, I would have avoided that hard conversation had I not had a goal that I was marching towards.
Yeah. 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 That's fascinating. This co-founder relationship is always so, people on the podcast always, describe it as a marriage, right? And there's so much communication and conversation that goes around that. There's, there's your highs, there's your lows. But it's fascinating how you went through the process of identifying, where the direction needed to go based on a long-term target. Is that,
that's where all the
that's just so brilliant. Yeah.
Well, because so let's say you and I were partners.
Yeah.
And let's say, I'm just going to make this stuff up, but like, let's say you wanted a $200,000 income. So let's say you and I are both working in the business and we're actually doing jobs that merit $100,000 salary. Yeah. Again, split your job from the asset. Just because you're 50-50 partners does not mean you both get the same salary and have it. Like, you have to get market comp and wages for the job you're doing. But let's say you and I are both providing services, like a job that makes $100,000. Let's say we make $500,000, we pay $150,000 in taxes, so we have $350,000 left over.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going, dude, let's distribute $100,000. And I'm sitting, no, let's grow. You're like, no, $100,000. I'm like, no, grow. You're like, no, $100,000. I'm like, no, grow. And like, no one freaking talks about this. So because the way entities work in the US, if we're 50-50 partners, we have to agree. And if you can't take $100,000 into distributions and me not. So like, we have to agree. And then what happens is like, we go back, forth. Let's say we both take $75,000 out so that we take $150,000 out. We have $200,000 left. Like, what are we going to spend it on? I don't know. What's our target equity goal? I don't know. So no one knows this shit. So then we're just arguing. And it's and this is what happened with my dad and I.
Yeah.
He's obviously twice my age and he wants more money today. And I'm like, let's grow. So reinvest. And like a misalignment from moment one. Like, they haven't had any discussions around this. So it's just made up in, conversations throughout the week.
Yeah. In hindsight, how do you set up those conversations for success? Do you, if you're talking to co-founders right now, do you strategically say, hey, every 3 months, you two have to have a conversation, see where your targets are, see where your growth is, make sure you're still aligned on either reinvesting or taking more money out? Is that kind of how do you lubricate the conversation, kind of set it up structurally? Because nobody wants to have those. Nobody wants to have to reevaluate if their kind of incentives change. If what, maybe they're looking to buy a house. Maybe I was looking to buy a house and I needed the money, the cash up front to put down a down payment. How do you lubricate or set up a structure so that those conversations can become more and more
I'm such a broken
effective?
record, man. So like, this just came to me. And so I apologize because I'm just a flashy object guy sometimes. So you ever take one of those surveys where like someone wants you to take a survey, you're like, oh yeah, I'll for sure do this. And then you answer 5 questions, you hit next. And then there's 5 more and there's no like, how many freaking questions are there? And then next thing you know, you're like, you keep going. You're like, well, I just
30 minutes later.
That's what it's like to be an entrepreneur. It's month after month, revenue, gross profit checking account, revenue, gross profit checking account. Like, how long are we doing this? What's the goal? Why are we doing this? Like, no one. So how you lubricate? He's like, Julian, what do you want, dude?
Yeah.
Like, do you want 5 million in 2030? If your expectations are 40 million, maybe we got to raise some money doing some acquisitions. If it's $1 million, that's like, shit, man, we don't have to grow that fast.
Yeah.
what the heck do you want? What are your income goals along the way? Now we have our constraints.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about like, how do you measure this? Like the beauty of like what I love about my job, I didn't invent any of this.
Yeah.
Apple and Amazon have an income statement, balance sheet, and a cash flow statement. And the laundromat down the road also does.
Yeah.
I didn't make any of this up. It's like, if you have that goal, you can legitimately back in your income statement, your cash flow statement, your balance sheet to see what that path looks like. And then every single month on the monthly financials, it should literally be, this is the experience people should have is I'm on track. Okay. We have this much cash in the business. Great. That's what we need to always have. We have excess. Swipe some money over for taxes because we have those estimated. Swipe some money over for distributions because we already know that that's excess based on our growth plan. We good, Julian? Should we keep going? Yep, let's go. And then, we sit down and we say, we don't have enough money for distributions and taxes. We have to dip into our working capital. Like, that's a problem. How come? Oh, we're not charging enough. We didn't sell them. Like, now you should pull that thread.
Right.
But dude, we just like, it's like that freaking survey. You just click in and you're like, I don't know, man. What's happening?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's such a great example. And I think a lot of us feel that way. And like, it's hard to remeasure while you're going through progress, but having that assessment, having the structure around it, I can see, where the success lies and where it comes from. Shifting more into, what you're focusing on Arkona. Tell us a little bit about, how you talk about this phenomenon of thinking about your business as an asset and how, businesses and business financials can kind of organize to run and help run the company. Tell us about the conception of that idea and also how to put it in action. If I was one of your clients.
So the idea came from we sold the business and I realized at the goal line, there's not like this stuff is not made up, man. Like we talk about valuations, like we talk about like Bitcoin and NFTs, like that's all like, who knows? Like that's a whole different conversation, but companies are financial assets. Do you have any investments in the stock market? Yeah. Like the value of those outside of the skeptical or the speculation.
Yeah.
The word fundamentals is just jargon for, does it have good cash flow?
Yeah.
So right? Snapchat does not, either does Peloton. You go on and on, they're burning through cash. As an investor, if you gave them $100, do you want more than $100 back?
Absolutely.
Their plan to generate cash flow is completely dictated on whether you're going to get $110 back or zero.
Yeah.
So my point is this, thinking about a financial asset, I was just thinking about operations from the founder's mindset. Go through a sale like that, you get hit with a semi truck to realize that, oh my God, there's a way that people value these things and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. That's what I went through. So understanding valuations is key. Like with houses, you put 50 grand in your master bath or the kitchen, it's way better than building a pool. Right. I mean, like people know these things. Your business is the same way, man. And so what happens is like all of this inception came from, my getting into finance after the sale of the company. So just realizing that sustainable, predictable, transferable cash flow creates a more valuable business.
Yeah.
It's really that. And so that's just a mindset. We've got these 5 principles in a training program to help people think like that. So there's an actual methodology to help people with this mindset. So it's kind of like two parts. It's the mindset, and then it's just mechanically building the plan. But like, I give you these keynotes, man, and like, I get done with like a 3-hour workshop, and like this one woman looks at me. She had like a $50 million business. She's like, I'm like, what was we go around? What are your takeaways? And like we got into the weeds, Julian, of like strategic planning and finance. All these different like operational, like the hows. And her takeaway is like, I just need to figure out what I want because then I can back into a plan. Because if we had an infinite amount of time and money and capital, there's nothing we can't do. But the moment you tell me that there's constraints of, I want $10 million valued company, equity valued in 2030, and I have to be able to fund my way to get there, like we have constraints and we have to live within those.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like we're just guessing and hoping that all the stuff that's going to work out, someone randomly comes out of the woodworks and gives us a bag of money for all the headaches that we've created.
That's man, yeah, that long-term planning, figuring out what you want and then backing into it. That's something that, I think, well, first of all, when you're running a startup, and I'm sure it's just, you don't think about it, fundamentally, because you want so much you focus so much on client acquisition, right? Product market fit, client acquisition, and in those kind of, I guess, I would say hold 95% of your focus every week, if not more.
Revenue. And like,
Yeah.
you need to be able to pay yourself, first of all. Like there's an article a couple of weeks ago that 26.2% of small businesses, privately held businesses in the US do not take a paycheck. Like, what the hell? Go get a job somewhere else. It's worth it more. Like, this is like, is it worth it?
Right.
We all
right.
ask that question. Like,
yeah.
Like, so yeah, like, and just to be very clear for the listeners too, like, this passion and conviction that I have right now, it took a decade to get here after the sale of the company. Like, I was chasing the vision of trying to help people so passionately. It cost me almost close to $500,000 personally, from bad partnership to not right product pricing fit. It was like, I just want to help everybody.
Yeah.
But like, guess what? The opportunity cost for me was close to probably $2 million between not taking a paycheck and burning through the sale some of my sale proceeds. So I didn't do what I'm talking about right now in the first chunk of my, startup career, which is this worth it, Ryan? You need to get paid and you need to be growing wealth while also having fun.
Yeah.
Like, how many founders do you know, Julian, that just for the pure, what they call it, the sunk cost fallacy or whatever, like they just won't give up? Which I love people for that. But like, dude, like sometimes the best thing you can do is be like you need to make 150 grand. Otherwise, like you gotta go like get a job and then do a side hustle at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. There's just, well, talking to you kind of through this process is just kind of misalignment on what they want. Right. And it's like, if you do want the struggle of a consistent startup, then that's fine. But if you are aiming some kind of target, whether it's, a product with a vision that's going to help everybody, or whether it's some kind of exit plan, it's all about the planning that precedes a lot of the actions that you should be taking, rather than proceeds once you have, revenue kind of gaining.
I wonder how many people because we play more in like the place. Well, I mean, people that go through a training everywhere from like a few hundred grand in revenue to a couple $100 million in revenue.
Yeah.
But like in the startup phase, how many people sit down and go like, what needs to be true for this to be worth it for me?
Yeah.
Like truly, like not from an emotional perspective, from the enjoyment of the hustle along the way and the income and wealth creation.
Yeah.
Like again, I just told you the story. Like I didn't do that 10 years ago. And I just followed my passion into burning through cash flow and having stress while I've got infertility problems, have my twins, we move and all this crap, and life is all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wish I would have just had someone that sit down and say, Ryan, is what you're doing worth it, man? Like, you have some other choices here. But like, I don't know if you see that, like most people just chase the dream and their idea first, and then they get burnt out, then look up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a common theme, right? Tell us a little bit about, you kind of talked about the recent decisions you made with you and your partner, and now you're able to kind of move your plan back to where its original place was. Tell us about the customers you're working with. What are the growth metrics you're seeing, the products that you have kind of out there? Tell us a little bit more about the traction of Arkona now that, it seems like after 2019, you kind of set up some different products to digitize your services and then add another function, kind of more technology. Love that transition and how you're kind of adjusting to the market, because I think a lot of companies get into this fallacy mindset of that I have to be this one thing forever and ever and ever. And that there's one founder said this so beautifully. He's like, product market fit is a point in time. And I was like, man, that's
amen. I love that. Yeah. I love that. I love that.
But yeah, tell us a little about the traction of the company now that you're well underway.
I would say it's interesting. It depends on what you define as traction. I'd say that I'm on track for my goals based on what the company wants to do for myself, for our clients, the exposure we want to hit. One of the missions of Arkona with the intentional growth program is we want to help educate entrepreneurs. So we kind of like the three different three different ways that I look at our three service offerings is the training is we teach people how to fish. All the things we've been talking about, we teach people how to do it. It's virtual or in person. So we now have a variety of options, do it yourself, virtual plus calls or the in-person group. I mean, so there's different ways. So that's helpful with the options. And then again, that's to teach people how to fish. Then there's the software dashboard where it's like, hey man, like, and again, this is a fishing analogy. We could come up with a different analogy, but like, hey, you want to go on a fishing trip? We're going to help you pack your gear, figure out what to do, where to go, that kind of stuff. But like, you're responsible for doing everything yourself still. Like, but you have better information. You don't have, we're expediting your learning curve. And then there's the fractional CFO services where you truly bring on a CFO. And that's like the white glove easy button to continue that fishing analogy. Yeah. You hire a guide, you show up, you get in the plane, they tell you where to go. They're like, putting the bait on your lure and everything.
Yeah, put the line out there for you, and so now you just have to haul it in.
And so like those things that like to get to that suite or that ability for people to build trust. And like, this is probably like talk about traction is it's taken 7 years of the podcast and I'm a professional speaker. So I go across and speak, building trust, having that brand consistency and the consistency over and over of the same messaging and having something that we are tried and true for and a drum that we're beating, that building trust. And there's the podcast, there's all the education, then they can stop. So they have the ability to kind of lean in based on people's need, their ability to, see how we can help them. Instead of us telling people what they need, I like people to tell us. So it starts with them listening and getting to know us. So like, I think to maybe answer your question as clearly as I can, Julian, is that I see our plan for the impact that we want to make, the wealth that we want to create, and the fun that we want to have. That's all very clear and it's all baked into our strategic plan, our financial model. And then for the clients, it's like they can lean in and we can scale as fast as people want to lean into what we're helping them with instead of forcing something down someone's throat, right? Like I'd rather, it's like the whole Seth Godin, you want to attract the right people. That was hard as hell, man. Like, taking the time to build that flywheel like that the right way. It just takes time.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say.
What are some of the biggest risks that Arkona faces today?
It's really interesting, man. I like all of the shit that's going on from inflation to supply chain issues to labor issues to geopolitical issues to in like energy. All of those things has actually wind at our back because people need more information, but more. And so the risk that we have is honestly right now, it's being able to make sure that we keep the service quality that we promise while scaling.
Yeah. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision?
I would like to I would like to monetize. I would like to do exactly what you're saying, where monetize the asset in 2030, whether it's through an ESOP, like by selling it to the employees. I've truly built the entire business that I want to have for as long as I can. But again, to live and breathe what we talk about, I really love my job. Yeah. And then as I have the income, I've got the platform and the income I want along the way. I want to have the ability to monetize this asset as I create it. Yeah. Through, most likely it's going to be an ESOP or some sort of other kind of mechanism where I can keep my job, keep doing what I'm doing, but not be completely, concentrated into this financial asset.
Yeah. I love that. And Ryan, we could talk for time. I don't even know, probably hours on end about, startups kind of planning around, successful future, whether it's an exit, whether it's, transitioning your role out of the company, who knows? Like there's so many different possibilities that we can chat through, but I know we're coming close to time and I need to ask this question just for some personal research, but also, for the audience as well. Whether it was now or whether it's now currently or in the past, what books or people have influenced you the most?
I actually just looked because I was talking to a guy. I've listened to 273 books over the course of the last 7 years. So I realized I was such a poor student that I realized that I'm an auditory learner. So it's kind of been this like gift. I'd say that there's a couple books that are big game changers for me. And there's kind of like how I think about the world. So I'll give a couple on like kind of the bigger picture and then more practical ones in the business. Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. With all of the stuff that's going on with the geopolitical and money and everything, that's a blueprint on how all money and geopolitics and macroeconomics works. If you really truly want to know why all this stuff is happening, that book is amazing. And I find a lot of peace. Some of the answers aren't great, but like, it's like, hey, at least I understand why.
Right.
Conscious Capitalism is another book, which is meaning create a valuable company and treat everybody well, and you're going to do extremely well. You don't have to be a nonprofit or greed is good. There's like a nice little like right in between of like build a good company, everybody wins.
Yeah.
And so I'd say those are two of the bigger ones. And then the two most recent books that I've really enjoyed, because I went through like a frenzy years ago of consuming all these business books, which all kind of just regurgitate similar things.
Same thing. Yeah.
Two recently, Who Not How by Dan Sullivan.
Yeah.
Was amazing. And I really enjoyed that one. It was a different take on just people in general and how to surround yourself with people that are the who's and who gives a crap about the how they're doing things. Yeah. The second one is the Path Less Stupid, or The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham.
Yeah.
And he talks about just a whole book about avoiding the dumb tax of doing stupid shit in the business. And I was like, yep, I've paid my fair share of dumb tax. So I'd say those four are the ones that are top of mind.
Amazing, man. I love, not only your experience, your honesty and your experience as well. Cause I know a lot of founders have gone through ups and downs when they've, gone through acquisitions, kind of have lessons learned that they're maybe not as open to discussing. So on, the transparency, the honesty, also the lessons and also the strategies that you instilled in this episode, I truly appreciate. And, like I said, I think we could talk hours on end more and more about ways to run a successful company, but I really appreciate you being on the episode, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. And last little bit is, where can we find you? Where can we support Arkona? If I'm a client that really wants to get into the weeds of my own business, what's your website? What's your LinkedIn? What's your Twitter? Where can we be a part of the mission?
So there's two easy ways to find us is Arkona.io. So it's ARKONA.io. That's the website. All the podcasts is out there. There's actually a Calendly link on a couple of the pages, the services pages. There's videos about the training. So like people can spend weeks on the website. I'm very easily accessible on LinkedIn. Is how I communicate most. And I've really enjoyed it too, man. You asked really good questions. I appreciate it very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Ryan, so much. And we'll have to do a version 2 of this episode in the future as well. But thanks.
I'm all for it, man.
I really appreciate it.
You bet.